Hello, everyone. Now, a few years back, I made the claim that I will not, out of a matter of principle, protect any women not related to me, or that I specifically want to protect for whatever reason I deem appropriate. Any woman in society that I come across that I do not explicitly want to protect will receive none from me. And now, this may seem like an irrelevant statement to make in a sense, but those of you who watch this channel understand exactly why I'm saying it. The decision to make this statement is informed by the particularly foul expectation that society places upon me as a man to function as some on-call vigilante ready to place myself in harm's way for women I don't know or care about. There have been men who have died upholding this unspoken social norm, and I, gentlemen, do not intend to be one of them. I remember in particular a homeless man who jumped in the middle of a robbery in progress and put himself between the woman being robbed and her assailant. He got stabbed and bled out on the ground while he lay there for over an hour with people nonchalantly walking by him. But, who cares, right? Because he's a bum and he's not like you, right? Right? Now, before I continue, first, I want to pose the question of whether or not it is moral to expect men to protect women for any reason whatsoever. And I contend that the answer is no. We don't tell police officers to run into harm's way for the good of society. We tax people's labor, we give it to the cops, and then they render their services. If we were to tell all the police officers in, say, the United States today that they will no longer be receiving a paycheck, they would stop protecting us overnight. And such is the rational outcome. And you know what I would call any police officer who continued to work without pay, putting himself in harm's way in the process? I'd call him a sucker, because that's what he would be. Only a sucker would put himself in harm's way for no incentive. And so I declare here and now that we as men have zero obligation to protect women. Zero. That means none. We tax our citizenry to sustain a military, and that military doesn't defend this country out of the goodness of their hearts or out of a sense of patriotism. That's all just fluff to foment unit cohesion. They get paid. That's why they're there. So why, men, are you under the impression that you have to protect women from violence? And why, women, are you under the impression that we owe you protection from violence? You want protection? Pay me. Compensate me. Otherwise, if I see a woman in danger, you're on your own. It's that simple. And the whole point of me bringing this up is that, again, when I made this claim a few years back, I also claimed that I cannot, in good conscience, allow myself, if I were ever called to jury duty in a rape trial, to convict a man accused of rape, even if the evidence was overwhelming. And I'm here to defend that statement once again with a logical refutation of those who claim this to be an abhorrent position or an extremist position or even a position that is misogynist or anti-women in any way. I hold it to be a pro-male position, irrelevant of women, and I will explain why. I've cited before in my previous videos the famous quote that a nation can be judged by how well it treats its prisoners. So with that said, let's talk about the death penalty. How many states in America, and I dare say even most of Western civilization, are currently moving away from capital punishment? We, as a civilization for the most part, we recognize the death penalty as a form of vengeful barbarism these days. And even when we do carry it out, even when we do execute someone, we try to place an emphasis on minimizing the suffering for the person being executed. And this is good. These type of things function as a civilizational barometer, and it says something about us as a people, that we can rise above the primitive instinct of revenge and strive for a more ordered and fair and just dissemination of punishment in our society. But the more important point regarding the death penalty I want to make here is the obvious one, that now our society, our great civilization, is having to come to terms with the fact that we have in fact done this, sent innocent men to their deaths, who were cleared of any wrongdoings posthumously through the advent of DNA testing. And we don't like the reflection we see in that mirror when we confront that little fact, do we? A dead man cannot benefit from a pardon or a financial settlement after being wrongfully accused, can he? And it's not too much of a stretch to assume that this is our society's main inspiration for increasingly nowadays doing away with the death penalty and capital punishment. Now, with all that said, let me ask you, gentlemen, if I refuse to sentence someone to death for a heinous crime they commit and are convicted of on the principle alone, that I cannot send a possibly innocent man to death, and yes, even if he's convicted, he's still possibly innocent, according at least to a standard of reasonable doubt for a conviction. So if I, on principle, refuse to condemn a possibly innocent man, albeit a convicted man, to death for his crime of, let's say, multiple homicides, how and in what logical analysis does it follow that I am defending the murders he's convicted of? Absolutely not. And in fact, I'm actually demonstrating my opposition to murder by commuting the offender's sentence to life imprisonment. So it's simple, really. It's unfair to the accused in the cases where men cannot effectively face their accuser or cross-examine them on, let's say, their sexual history or activities in a trial involving the forcible initiation of sex without the accuser's consent. This inability to face and cross-examine one's accuser is in full violation of some of the most fundamental tenets of law devised by human beings, and it works very simply. If John Doe says you stole something from him, you should, if placed on trial as a result of this accusation, you should be able to confront John in a court of law to his face and say, here is the evidence I have providing that I did not steal this from you. And nothing John does in his past or future or present should be suppressed as not admissible, period. And that's what rape shield laws do. And just like I'm not a murder apologist for refusing to send even a convicted man to his death, I am not a rape apologist for refusing to convict a man accused of rape on the basis of him not being able to obtain a fair trial, even if the evidence is overwhelming. This, gentlemen, is how kangaroo courts form. A civilized society does not, no matter how heinous the crime, skip the fundamental right to fully cross-examine an accuser. And yes, if you need to hear it, if you want the soundbite, here it goes. I would rather have a rapist go free than to see an innocent man or even a guilty man imprisoned without a fair trial. So go ahead, log that in your extremism ledger, okay? And I also want to talk about the fact that these rape shield laws also broadcast the identity of the accused rapist for all to see, yet shield the identity of the woman making the accusation from the media. And given that we as a society have begun to understand the processes which drive social contagion and mob mentality and the like, we have a responsibility, I think, to either hide the identities of both the accused and the accuser or make both of them public. We have that responsibility if we are in fact serious about the process of disseminating justice in our courts of law. And this is why sometimes the defense in a high-profile case will ask to move the trial to a different state or city, because there is undoubtedly an ability to pollute the integrity of the trial by populating the jury with people who live in the immediate vicinity of where the crime happened. So is moving the trial in this manner a crime apology? If a juror, when serving jury duty, decides genuinely that the person being charged with a crime did not receive a fair trial as a result of prejudice fomented by the locals which make up the jury, and decides ultimately that he is not guilty because this factor made him or her believe that the case could not have been proved to a reasonable doubt, is this crime apology? And so again, if I believe that it is impossible to render a fair trial in a rape case because the accused rapist cannot confront his accuser, or at least his counsel cannot confront his accuser, or the accuser was enjoying a form of legally ordained anonymity that shields her from the prejudiced forces of the court of public opinion, am I apologizing for rape? Bullshit. You want to help stop rape or punish rapists? Well, then let's do it in a court of law like civilized people do, where there are protections in place for those accused of any crime, especially ones as serious as rape. Your rape shield laws are really just a light version of the same sick, barbaric human tendencies that saw the mob justice that lynched countless potentially innocent black men from trees on the say-so of some, Percy's wife accusation. How many of these men were innocent? How many? We'll never know, of course. But, at least women felt safe. So that's all that really matters, isn't it? More to come, gentlemen. Thanks for listening.